Eyal, I think there's a good opportunity for you to introduce yourself. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it. And then we can go into the details what we wanted to present today.
Cool, great. First of all, Perry, thank you. And Mark, thank you for having me today. Nice to meet everybody. My name is Eyal Orgil, as was introduced. I'm going to speak with a Canadian accent, so if anybody can't understand it, just raise your hand, that's fine. I've been in Israel for many years. I am the CRO and one of the co-founders of DealHub. DealHub was founded to create what we call CPQ, a very strange name, but we'll talk about it more in more details. Configure, price, quote, basically the ability for organizations to go and build out quotes and proposals where things have to be configured and priced in the right way. We've been in business now for, 8-9 years. Won't do too much advertising. Maybe it'll come out later on. I don't want to promote it as a product type of thing, but basically one of the leaders in the CPQ space today. We work with a number of different CRMs, one of those being HubSpot, which is a really great CRM, really coming up strong these days, which is great to see. We've been integrated to HubSpot now for the past year. Previous to that, we were working with our CPQ with other CRMs, as we still do, but a really great solution. Won't go into that. As I was told, don't go into the advertising side of things, so I won't do that, but definitely we can talk about things in more detail, obviously, later on.
Okay, so what we wanted to focus on today is talking about quoting and how you're pricing and how you go through that process of having that conversation, how your sales team has that conversation, where they get to that stage where now they need to configure, they need to price, they need to quote. And before we go in, what we wanted to touch on is different levels of ways that you can do that. So let's start off with the basic ones. I think Eyal and I. First thing that we can do is actually show you how HubSpot is quoting out of the box. Okay, so in most cases, if I need to, and I'll go into a deal at the moment just to show you what I'm talking about. Yoni, how do I get to your?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a test deal that we've created here in Penguin's portal, and I just created this a few minutes ago. So I have my contact. I have the 3 objects that we usually use. I have the contact who I've been in contact with. The company, I just used ourselves as here are our playbooks that we talked about in our last in our 2 sessions or 3 sessions ago. And I get to the stage where the deal stage where I say, okay, hang on a second, things are getting interesting. Let's create an SOW in our case. And how do I do that? Okay. So once I get to an SOW or a quote, if it's relevant for the specific companies, HubSpot has 2 main objects that you can use to do this quote. One is line items, which you can manage here inside HubSpot, which can be an array of line items. I'm not going to do this now, but for every type of product or service that you actually have in HubSpot, you can actually create a library of line items, and with the SKU, a billing start date, terms, frequency, add more information, add columns. And based on that, I can actually decide if it's custom at payment, what is the billing frequency, so on and so forth. And then what that allows me to do is not to start from scratch each time. It allows me to pull in the line items when I'm creating the quote. So it gives you two things that you can actually manage. How do I find that, first of all? So if you go into sales and you go into quotes, or if you just go into the deal itself where I was, and you go into line items, then it allows you to actually update the products, which is the line items. As I said, you click on edit and you can either update new line items, or you can create the quote. So quote is the second stage, and I'm just showing you where everything is and how it's being used on a basic level. Eyal will give us the details on the actual process and how you would actually go into it. But now if I want to create a quote based on those, I get to the stage, I click on quote, and then I can choose a template. So let's say I want my modern template that these can be updated and logos can be added and so on and so forth. Okay, so you see it already has our logo with the test deal. expiration dates. So let's say in 60 days, I can add comments to buyer, purchase items, and then I go forward. It's already got included in the quote the person that I'm actually speaking to. I can add other contacts and obviously the company. And then once I go forward, I already have all this information. You can see here on the top, it's telling me where I am in the process. As we said, this is kind of the basics of the CPQ. We're kind of going through the same process, but you'll see in a few minutes that this is when things are not that complicated. In this case, I've actually made things a bit more complicated because I have 3 line items. Okay, we've got a landing page that we have to do. We have a HubSpot implementation and a technical retainer. Okay, so I have everything. I can put in the unit price. I can give a discount here, net price, and manage telling me what my MRR is. I can add an image, description, which currency I'm using. So this is allowing me to actually go. Now I can include a space for a written signature or use e-sign. And then again, payment links, Stripe or HubSpot payments. HubSpot, Stripe and HubSpot payments works in the US, I think, and maybe it's going to take time until I think you can use it outside of the US, but the US, so you put in a payment, which is actually cool. We should start doing that podcast. You know, payment link and it's good to go. Will make Lital's life much easier. Click on next, and then I can publish the quote. So now I have a quote ready to go, and I have a link that I can actually share with my team or share internally or externally. I have my test quote, all the information, comments. This is actually created by Yoni. I'm on his computer. And then I have the basic information, subtotals, who this came from, print quote or download. So yeah, let's start with, so that's the basics. That HubSpot allows you to manage that process, and then you can actually manage if someone opened the quote. HubSpot knows if they opened it and if they're interacting. So this basic process that we're talking about, I think, is kind of the basics that HubSpot is giving you out of the box. Let me go back to, as I said, the different features that will allow us. But if we want to say, okay, this is enough to me to start with, and just another word that we can add to this, this is using HubSpot's basic features. There are lots of other basic tools for quoting, just on the basic level, like DocuSign, PandaDocs, any of those, all of those integrate with HubSpot. You can connect that like you connect any other of those things. So for example, we use PandaDoc, and Perry goes in, creates a quote, and that is connected here on the right-hand side. You can actually see the connection today. I just want to touch on that so you can see it gets implemented. So I think PandaDocs here is somewhere. Yeah, so I can actually create the doc and then go into PandaDocs and make, PandaDocs. And if there was a PandaDoc that was created, I would see it here. That's an integration and DocuSign, and there are a few others. If you go into the marketplace, you can find all the basic quoting tools that you could be using today. And I think that's really powerful, because the idea is to, first of all, make sure that your sales team, and this is, I think, one of the biggest things, especially in today's market, I want to connect to other systems if I have to connect to them, but I want my sales team to try and be in one place and not have to go into 7 different systems. It's hard enough to get them to actually work inside the CRM and update everything. And again, whatever process we kind of build out, and I'd love to get your insight now, has to think of the user and the ease of use and make sure that he goes into the process, because we, the RevOps side, can build all these wonderful things. And then you go to a company and you work with partners, and they say, okay, this is great, but my sales team is not even using it. He's gone back to his Excel, he's gone back to his book, and he's just like, guys, this is too much for me. And another comment that the last one, and then you can dive into this, which I keep hearing on a daily basis, is let my team touch the CRM as the minimum as possible. can you automate everything? So it's like we're having conversations this week of, we had a meeting, the meeting was ended. I don't want to know about anything. I don't want to click on anything. I want it automatically to be updated in the CRM that we had that meeting and it was completed. Now, we're not there yet. We're getting there, but that's the kind of idea that those are the expectations of the users. So how do you see this as, an integral part of the sales team, of the sales process? And how do you guys look at this whole process of when is the right time to, first of all, let's start with the basics. Is it important to actually make sure that you're doing these basics? And then when is the right time to move to more advanced systems like yours?
Okay, well, first of all, Perry, you got to be using our system, not another system, but we'll talk about that later on. Let's take a step back and say, well, we said CPQ meant configure, price, quote, but why is that important? What does that mean? And compared to what we saw a moment ago directly through HubSpot. Yes, you could build out a quote in HubSpot and do it like we saw. You could also do it in Excel, and you can do it in Word documents, and you can do it on a piece of paper and do that. Where does configure, price, quote come into play is basically for first and foremost, when you have to configure something. It means you may only have 3 line items, but what are the 3 correct line items that you need to do? Because you may have licenses that are charged from 1 to 5, to 5 to 50, 50 to 100, or you may have dependencies and prerequisites that go with other products. And again, this depends on what your product line is. Even in the software space, you may have different products that need to go together. Obviously, you're selling hardware and software together. There's hardware that goes with licensing from the software. If you're selling something, that's mechanical, it's got other parts that need to go together, which parts go together and so forth. So first and foremost, when you have to configure something. Now, configuring doesn't mean it has to be as complex as putting together. We have organizations that put together tractors and things of that sort. It could even be that you're selling software, but you sell ramps, if anybody knows that term. So you're selling some licenses to start off with, and after 3 months, some more licenses, and after 3 months, some additional licenses. Now, what happens to the price of that? Because maybe you went over a tier level, and now you have to go into the next tier. So we'll talk about the pricing in a moment, but that's already configuring things that need to go together. Sometimes you have other things are peak periods if you're selling licenses. If you have sort of licenses that go to agents, you'll have peak periods during the year. What happens if you come to make an amendment? Means someone wants to buy some more licenses. You're 6 months into that contract. Do you now buy it for another year, or do you have to co-term it? What's the right product that needs to go to configure to that end of that period? Because maybe you sell it by different periods, different amount of months is a different price point or a different product that you're selling. So first and foremost, when you have to configure something, that's a key thing that you have to look at on the CPQ side of things, where it's not the same as just going and picking a product line item. Now, yes, you could go pick a product line item, and if all you have is 5 products in your catalog, maybe that's not something that you're a candidate for CPQ. But if you have more lines than that, or you start adding some complexity into that, then you want to start looking at your issues that you may be facing. Are salespeople making mistakes on doing that? It means, are you giving away money? You're not charging away, things of that sort as well. On the pricing side, when you have, and here's some great points, we'll talk about these things as well as we're going through. How are you pricing things? Do you price at different tiers? Are people giving the right price points? Are people giving away discounts that they just feel really comfortable giving? Hey, let's give 50% discount. Why not? No one's checking me. I'll just do it, and I'll close off a few deals. Especially in this time of financial uncertainty and all that, you definitely don't want to be giving everybody away any kind of price point that they want. So you want to have some sort of oversight on that, what's happening on that. Again, you could pick your products and just go send a quote as we saw a moment ago, but do you need an approval process in there? Someone have to provide some sort of governance over that, what you're quoting to people and what pricing you're giving to them. Some other ones we can take a look at. Even commercial policies. Do I give away? You said a moment ago, what's our payment terms on different lines? Well, maybe we have a policy that we don't give certain payment terms to somebody, or we're only given under certain conditions, or only for certain product lines. And again, who's going to overlook those things? So these are really key things that go down to your bottom line of how much money are you making off of business, or how much you're giving away, or how is your policies being adhered, because somebody created those policies and said we have to make sure that we stick to them.
So it also tie into the amount of salespeople I have. When you start getting policies, I'm assuming that it's not 2 salespeople that can have.
Yeah, typically you'll start to see organizations, from my experience, doing this now for 9 years and talking to organizations anywhere from 5, 10 salespeople up to thousands of salespeople. Usually you start getting in around, at 5, you'll start to maybe have some issues. When you get to 10 people, it's really difficult to go and maintain some of that. How are you keeping control over that team? How are you making sure? And especially nowadays, when people are working oftentimes remote, they're not in the office, that they're going to come up to you and say, hey, can I have that discount? They're talking to you from the other side of the world, and they're not available when you are to even ask you. So instead of calling you up on the phone or waiting for your email, which might be a 12-hour response, they're just going to go ahead and give that discount. So it does go on where the team's located, the number of reps that you have to go, and deal with it definitely starts to make it a bigger factor. And it's just harder to control a larger team, more people that you have to monitor, not monitor, I guess, manage, I guess is a better word. You're not trying to monitor them, you're managing them on a daily basis.
And the approval process is something also that in most cases, when you get to that side, you need that to be managed properly as
you definitely need it on when you get to a certain size. And I'll give examples of organizations that they grow. It might just be that when there's 2 or 3 people sitting around the office, hey Joe, hey Bob, can I give them 60-day payment terms? Can I give them another 5% discount? But once again, you start to grow, and not everybody can interrupt you at every moment. You're not always in the office at every moment. There's more people involved in it. The chances are, if you've got 5, 10 or more salespeople, you're already going into higher transaction of kinds of processes, your sales process that you're working on. So again, more things are happening. You want to control that. Once you start getting to a bigger team, it gets harder to make sure that what ends up happening in any organization. Why do you have processes? Because you have to make sure people are working according to the way that you work. And approval is a process. It's making sure that it goes through the right number of people. And as you get into different sizes of deals, there may be a number of people that need to review it. Sometimes it's legal, sometimes just management, sometimes the CFO or the CEO if it's a smaller company, depending how you're structured. You've got different people around the world that you have to, product team members sometimes if you're quoting certain products. And that could also even be, doesn't do anything with price. You might have released a new product, and the product team wants to approve every one of those to make sure we're selling it into the right environment. So there could be a lot of different reasons why you have an approval process, from sizes of teams and also how you actually as mature as an organization as you start to sell more products and more capabilities.
And if I was still using a basic system and not something robust as a CPQ system, then I would kind of go do something similar, but that back and forth either would be Slack, email, so on and so forth, or in HubSpot, I can create tasks for different people and say, hang on, but that communication is still one-on-one, one-to-one kind of communication where I have or the approval process. So you could use tasks on a day-to-day basis to manage that up to that stage.
The basic functionality is there. If you just look even at tasks, assigning a task to an approver where they've got a million tasks, how do they know what those tasks are? Now you may start getting, okay, let's start organizing and structure them in different ways. But if you know you're going to an approval process, you've got your dashboard as a manager, you go in and see what are the quotes waiting. Obviously, as a sales manager, the thing you want to look at, what's happening in my sales. So I'll go to my sales dashboard, I'll see what's happening on the approvals. I can even then decide which are the ones I want to approve first. If that's the case, maybe on the size of the deal, I've got all that information. It can be sent to me by email, by Slack, or I go into my dashboard. So it's a very structured way that I can go in and understand what's happening with my sales process. And it's not mixed in with other tasks. And yes, it is a sort of a task, but it's a specific task dealing for me as a sales manager with my sales process and my team and how they're moving forward.
And then obviously the priority of those is as important, so that it defines for the sales manager also what he should look at the first thing in the morning when he comes in and say, okay, am I the bottleneck and am I stopping deals going forward?
Yeah.
And so on.
Well, definitely as a sales manager, the first thing you're looking at is what am I selling today? What am I moving forward and all that? So that's the first priority you want to get to. Not to say it's more important than other tasks I may have on but when I'm in the bucket right now, looking at my sales process and my team's advancement, that's the thing I know where to go to. It's all presented to me. You can get approval emails or Slack messages sent to you that even tell you exactly what's involved. So what discount was given, what terms were given, other information that was specific to the opportunity I'm working on. So I don't have to go in anywhere else. I got it all there presented right to me. And I can even sometimes through that Slack message or email message, just reply right there saying approving or rejecting and just keep the flow going so we don't have any kind of delays. One of the worst things to do is to be slow to get back to your customer. And it's one thing when it's a salesperson that's slow in the process. It's one when you're waiting, frustrating, first of all, as a salesperson, waiting for your managers and other people to approve it. But there's a customer at the end of the day, that's who you're selling to. And if they're waiting for something, it's all because someone didn't get to it, didn't know what to approve. And it just had to go back and forth with emails and telephone calls and WhatsApps and or Slacks and all that. Then obviously you're not giving the service that you need to your customer. Meantime, your competition may be doing that and they're getting back to the customer faster.
Okay. So process-wise, when, as you said, these are the questions you would start asking yourself where you say, okay, maybe we need to start looking for a more of a robust system to start looking just to configure pricing and that. Who is the person that would probably make this decision? And like, if we're talking again, I doubt it's going to come from the marketing manager, but it might come from either the RevOps team or the sales operations or the VP of sales. Who usually do you think you find are the people that, if anyone here is interested in this or bumping into this, they could go to the right person in the organization and say, by the way, maybe I don't know if you're aware of it, we should actually look for a system to kind of be able to take this to the next level.
Well, it's going to vary between the different types of organizations and different size of organizations. Obviously, in the last 10 years or so, we've had the role of sales operations, which is the people helping the salespeople often deal with all their operations. So they're typically the ones that are looking at sales tools. If you have that kind of a role, or revenue operations, sometimes it's the same. Different companies work different. Some sales ops under sales, rev ops under finance, but they're also people looking at efficiency and getting the right products and pricing out to the customer. It could be the VP sales if it's a smaller company. Sometimes it's a CEO if it's a very small company. Sometimes it's a sales enablement person that's looking at the tools that the salespeople are using. Usually that's going to be the larger organizations. They have specific dedicated people looking at how can we improve efficiency. There's even sometimes digital transformation on very large organizations where they start looking at how do we digitize all our different processes. You get those kind of roles. But typically what we find, what we're dealing with, it's the sales operations people, it's the revenue operations. Sometimes it's the administrators of the CRM itself. They might be if it's a smaller company, or they might be the front line that's looking at the tools that the salespeople are using and the efficiency of how they're going through the process. It could even sometimes come from the CFO, like we're seeing it a lot now, where it's not always in these times right now, it's not always the CFO that's specifically going out and saying it, but they're the ones that are looking for these tools because they're looking for the efficiency right now to reduce giving away the leakage, a lot of money that we're giving away, to make sure that we're doing everything by the books because every dollar counts right now, or shekel, wherever we are. So it all counts. So they're looking at these things as well. So anybody dealing with the sales process of how we're getting it and how we're approving it and how we're making ourselves more efficient are going to be, and it's just going to vary a little bit between the different kinds of organizations, who's the actual person that'll do it. And it'll generally be, it can be a number of people from that group as well involved in it.
Maybe you can show us kind of what it looks on your side, which I know it's connected to HubSpot.
I don't think we can connect
If we can
the computer.
log in, or it's not going to work.
Can we get a computer to connect in quickly, or?
Yeah, I think we can switch. If you log in, we can do that. In the meantime, are there any questions from you guys sitting here?
Sure. It's on the basis of Sales Hub.
Of the Sales Hub, yeah. It's part of the Sales Hub, and then that's where your team. And then the other thing that I think we're talking about is that what we're hearing mostly is that the quotation, the configuring pricing, and so on, in the end, also ends up in an invoice. So it depends what invoicing system that you're using.
Yeah.
That obviously needs to be tied or integrated back into HubSpot, or integrated into your CRM, because that information will have to go into the invoicing. So that, I mean, the basic way of doing it is to create even the quote and then send that information to the invoicing team, and then, but that's extra work. Yeah, sorry.
When we're talking about trying to reduce revenue leakage in the form of salespeople going overboard with discounts, how do you avoid that becoming very, very effective with it? Because can you say what percentage would have kept the deal without sacrificing the maximum possible revenue? You don't know if it would have been accepted otherwise.
First of all, you generally have a policy in the org. Sorry. Well, the question was, how do you make sure that that it's not you said a speculative sort of approach?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like the whole concept of the CPQ is you make it as data-driven, documented, and scientific as possible. But when you're then doing the retrospective sort of analysis of where things might get out of hand, it's hard to tell what would have worked and what wouldn't have.
So it's not a speculative approach with putting an approval process around that. You're not looking at a salesperson trying to see what they can work out. First of all, we're starting off at the point where the company has a policy. Okay, you have a policy that says, I sell you this software, it can allow for 10% discount. I can give software that can go 50, or support, you can give so much discount and so forth. An organization generally is going to have a policy that they allow. So it's not up to the salesperson. Now, within that range, the salesperson can now see if I have up to 10%, maybe I want to only give 8%. Great, no problem, no approval process needed. I might want to see if I got to 11%, I'm going to need the approval process. You know what, if I bring it back to 10%, I don't need the approval process. Now, some of that's playing a game with what can I offer the salespeople. Sometimes it's salespeople, and we're salespeople, we're trying to see what we can get away with. It might be internally to see where I can get to with the customer that I don't need an approval process because I don't need it going through all of my management. I'm trying to talk about sneaky things salespeople do, but that's what we do because we're trying to get the right deal out to the customer. So first and foremost, an approval process is there from an organization point of view to make sure you're adhering to their policies and make sure you're doing what's wanted, but it also gives the visibility to the salesperson very quickly and very easily. It's not that every quote has to go, and you see this with smaller companies. Every quote goes to the CEO, and they decide now you don't know what's going to approve, what's not, where's the wind blowing from, is that going to be allowed to approve? So it's a very set policy. Now, you don't have to go crazy in an organization just because you have approval process. We've seen ones that go crazy. Those don't work. We give best practices. Don't go too crazy on that, but protect yourself. Protect what margins you need to keep. Obviously, if you're selling hardware, you can't go, beyond certain discounts because you have costs yourself. So it really comes down to a lot of different plays. Normally, as a CPQ vendor, we don't get into that. We'll tell you what to do. You have your policy in place. We can give best practices of what to do, and there's various ways to do that. But it's there as an organization to protect yourself for whatever reason you've decided, business reason you've decided, these are the discounts that I'm going to allow. Yeah.
Is it possible to integrate the items to other software?
When you say integrate you're asking if we can integrate the items to other software. What do you mean by the items to
The
other
line items that I showed
Right.
in the product, the line items.
So when you would say integrate other systems, like to provision it,
To a website or system?
you have different ways. There's different ways,
Yeah.
first of all, that you're selling. Sometimes you're selling through an e-commerce site. Sometimes you're selling where people are going through a process. Sometimes it's a direct sales process where you're going through a CPQ. Sometimes it's a product-led growth methodology where in a product itself, you can add more licenses by yourself and go that. It's similar to an e-commerce environment sort of thing. Typically where a CPQ comes in is on the sales process because it's someone actually physically having to go in. You're going into your deal and you're saying, I want to generate a quote from that deal. I'm now a salesperson or a partner. Maybe you give your partners access to it and they can go in and build out their quote. An e-commerce system will work similar, but it's usually got a smaller set of functions. And it's usually within that e-commerce platform where they've already said which products you can buy. And typically you're buying much simpler products. You're not going and configuring lots of systems. Now, the difference is if you go into an auto manufacturer, you can start building out the car that you want, but they've spent millions of dollars oftentimes, if it's the Audis and BMWs, of building a solution that's very dedicated to that one specific solution. And you can't go take that and move it over to another solution. A commercially available CPQ is going to be good for different industries, different types of companies. You're going to be able to come in and configure it. In our case, we configure our solution somehow hard, you code it with software coding, but that's just different methodologies, how it's set up. But then you'll go in and you'll set it up for whatever environment you need. And if you change your business model, you change your pricing, go in there very quickly. Cars come out for a certain year. It's a good product for a year. Someone built it, that's fine. That was an investment that we did for it. So typically you don't see CPQ in the terminology of CPQ in an e-commerce environment, but it's definitely in the background. Oftentimes you will find in an e-commerce environment so that your indirect sales and direct sales are using the same pricing engine will be used. So for example, in DealHub's case, we have customers that direct sell through our CPQ. We'll see the interface in a moment. Or when it comes to the e-commerce is actually pinging the pricing engine so that it's the same pricing used depending on which stream you're coming in. So you've got that multi-channel capability of coming in, depending if it's your customers doing it themselves or a salesperson generating the quote, or even a partner environment, or a partner coming in as well for different methods.
The other thing about e-commerce that I've seen is that there are integrations with, you can continue, with Shopify or Stripe and so on and so forth, that from your website or Shopify, you create the products there and then they get pulled into HubSpot. So from that side, from the end of the customer coming back into the CRM, and then before you move to go to the quoting, that is something that integrates.
Yeah, so a quick look at what DealHub does. A little bit different from the traditional HubSpot is you do have right within your HubSpot deal screen, you've got a couple buttons that we add in to either create a quote, or if I'm a salesperson, I have several different versions of quotes that I've generated, so I can go and look at those different versions. Once I've gone into create quote, I just quickly set it up already on the screen. We go into what we call a playbook. It's funny how everybody nowadays calls something a playbook. We call it a playbook as well. The idea is to walk a salesperson through a process. So we've read in some basic information from the CRM, so we know what currency we're selling in, we know what geography we're selling in, which is also very important. We didn't talk about before. If I sell the same product in a different country, it may have a different price point. It may have different terms and conditions that need to go onto that. So it's also important to understand where I'm selling into, and the salesperson's already got those details probably put in the CRM. Then what our playbook is basically a set of questions that you can go and configure specifically for your sales process. So if I was a software company, I might just have that I need to know how many users do I need and what duration do I need, and it's automatically going to populate me the products. And the salesperson now, I don't have to do anything. As you've noticed, I'll make a change and you'll see that I'll put it back to none. You'll see there's no product selected. All I went in is picked what kind of solution I need, and it already told me the products that I need to include it. Of course, now it's going to be slow as I do it again. Did I lose my internet connection?
No, okay, good.
Oh, there we go. So we got our products that are set up. Now, I said earlier, what happens if we want to price in different ways? So if I'm selling based off of tiers, so instead of 20 users, I want to sell, what is it, 420? I'll get my glasses out here. So we'll see 420 users. I don't know if anybody noticed, the price just dropped to $39. So I can already set up the system so it's pricing me the right price point. If I was doing this directly in HubSpot, I might have had to pick a different product line, or I might have to go back and make a change and make sure I selected the right product. Or as we said before, sometimes you're allowed to pick your own price, but did you pick the right price? In a CPQ environment, you're putting policies in place. There's a certain product that needs to be sold at a certain price point, and as we said as well, discounting. Now, what if I sell that for, say, 24 months? Then I want to offer it at even a better price because I'm giving a longer duration. That's a typical example of a software environment. So, and again, we can go on to all kinds of different services and things that we put in. What if we have mandatory things that we have to select? Again, we're making sure that the salesperson selects it, and it's automatically going to add in the right support level that we need. We can even get to the point of even adding in changes to our contract terms. But here I said in the example, sometimes you don't let them do whatever they want, and we can put approval processes in place where we can have multiple different approvals. So just as a taste of what you can do, and we can model it right to what you want with a CPQ solution, whether it's DealHub's or someone else's, you want to model it to the sales process that you're working in. It's not a generic, pick a product, pick this. What are the right products? What's the right flow to take? And we talk about it like a decision tree. I'm going to walk the salesperson through a process and make sure they have a valid quote, so that you want to make sure in a CPQ, one of the issues that we have is people picking the wrong products or putting the wrong products together, is you have the ability to make sure that you have the right configuration in place so that you don't have any mistakes when it goes out. Now, simple if you're selling maybe software, think of selling a high-end hardware system where cables cost, you need a lot of cables and they each cost $20,000. And what happens if you miss one or two cables? Who's paying for that $20,000 or $40,000 that you just forgot to include? Now, sometimes it's very expensive, sometimes it's much less, but you also look really bad in front of a customer and say, oops, I forgot to sell you this. I want to come back and redo your quote. So again, different things to improve your processes. You make sure your policies are there, have a better relationship with your customer, make sure you can get back to them. I don't think we'll go into the whole thing now, but we can go into, we can generate documents, we can generate content even in a web format where you can send it out and send it in a web format, engage with the customer, have online chats with them. So continue the process, not just building out a quote, but continue that process. Maybe have to go back and make modifications to the quote. And again, update that for the customer. And again, always making sure everything's updated. And most important, all the information is synced back to the CRM. So everything is there. One of the things that people always complain about CRMs, doesn't matter if it's HubSpot, Salesforce, or anything, salespeople don't use it. One of the ways that you make sure, and why is that important to use it? Because you took a CRM, not just to maintain your sales process, but also to get statistics and data out of that. Understand where your business is, what's your forecast, your pipeline, what have you closed? Management won't get anything if the data is not in there right. How do you make sure the data is in there right? You make sure the salespeople use it. And how do you make sure the salespeople use it? Give them a tool that helps them, and all the information syncs back over there. So with all the other things that we talked about earlier, you also get a lot of value through the whole process because everything now works. If you don't make salespeople happy, I always tell people the biggest, and I often talk to my customers and I say, I don't ask them how many salespeople I say have. I say, how many complainers do you have? Because the salespeople, that's all we do is complain. But make it as minimal complaints, make it easy for them to use so that they'll put the data into your CRM, and as an organization, you get the value that you actually wanted to get out of your CRM when it's used in a proper way.
Okay, excellent. I think we run out of time, correct? Okay, Eyal, thank you very much. That was very interesting. I think that we can have another session in the next couple of months. We want to talk about kind of the extension of what I call the sales enablement of not only reaching out to get that meeting, but once you send out the quote, how do you have that whole communication? And I think set up another session to talk about that. It's very interesting. We didn't have time to talk about it today, but that is, how do you communicate with your potential customer, as Eyal was alluding to, and kind of looking at the different ways of, did they open the documents? Did I send them a quote? How do I communicate with them? How do I make sure that we don't miss that? Because usually when you're having a conversation with a customer, there's a good chance they're speaking to someone else in parallel.
Oh, they're most likely speaking to somebody.
And if they're not, then they're not doing their job properly. So you got to make sure that you don't miss time-wise, and you do it properly, and you're there until you can actually close the deal. Thank you very much for coming over.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.